The silence of the night felt so heavy that every sound and shadow seemed closer. It was our wedding night. The room still carried the warmth of celebration and the faint scent of flowers and champagne. Outside, the city pretended to sleep quietly, while we were inside the room. I instinctively reached for the light switch, and she caught my wrist. Not hard, not dramatic, just enough to stop me. She leaned close enough for me to feel her trembling breath and whispered, "Don't turn off the lights. He'll come." I smiled, thinking people say strange things when nervous, but her eyes weren't playful or shy. They were fully focused. I asked who she meant, but she didn't answer immediately, just scanned the room's corners, ceiling, mirror, and behind the curtains. Then I realized it wasn't a preference, it was a warning, a plea, as if something bad had already happened. I laughed softly to break the tension, saying the lights were too bright anyway and we could dim them. Marriage is about compromise, right? The word dim made her flinch, and she shook her head, her earrings chiming, whispering, "No, on." There was something heartbreaking in her voice, as if she had always been told that fear of the dark is childish. I said, "Fine, lights on, whatever makes you comfortable." As I said it, a strange unease crept in, not because of her fear, but because it felt familiar, older. She exhaled in relief, thanked me repeatedly, and apologized too quickly, which struck me more than her request. We sat on the edge of the bed. The room felt tense and wrong, not haunted, just waiting. I tried to pull her closer, but she stayed stiff, perhaps counting seconds in her head. I joked, "Monsters don't exist, there's nothing to fear," but she didn't argue, just softly said, "That's what everyone thinks." The light above us hummed faintly, a sound usually ignored, now feeling like a lifeline. Minutes passed, and she kept glancing at the switch, afraid I might forget, that habit or comfort might betray her. That quiet, exhausting vigilance felt older than her, older than us. When I asked again who he was, she squeezed my hand and said, "Not tonight." I realized this story leaks out slowly through small moments, not all at once. The bedside clock ticked louder than it should, reminding that the night moves on whether we're ready or not. I wondered if love is enough to protect from things that thrive on rules, neglect, and tired moments. I leaned back against the pillows, lights blazing, and she curled rigidly beside me, staring into the bright safety as if it might vanish if she blinked. A chilling thought crossed my mind. Years from now, someone might reach for the switch. Have you ever wondered why some people cling to small habits as if their life depends on them, especially as night closes in? A glass of water by the bed, a door left open, a lamp glowing, things that stop being preferences and become rules, not because they make sense, but because they feel like the last thread holding the night together. Once the lights stayed on, the room fell into a strange calm, not peaceful, but tense, like a breath being held. She relaxed slightly, and I noticed how worn she looked. Not tired, but exhausted from years of bracing herself. Her eyes never left the light, watching it like a person in the room that might abandon her if ignored. I tried to talk about normal things, the wedding, the guests, the silly cake topper we laughed about. Every time my voice drifted, her gaze snapped back to the ceiling, counting, listening. I realized the light wasn't about brightness, it was proof. Proof the room was still what it claimed to be, unchanged while no one was looking. I teased her gently, saying we could leave every light on in every house we ever lived in. She smiled, but it was sad, the smile of someone who knows their need is impossible to sustain. Quietly, she said,
It doesn't work like that. The words chilled me because they implied rules, systems, conditions. I asked what she meant, believing fear shrinks when you name it. She shook her head and said the light only works if you remember why it's on. The sentence stayed with me, offering no comfort at all. I began noticing details I'd missed, the shadows retreating but not disappearing, the mirror reflecting more ceiling than it should have, the hum of electricity louder than the sleeping city outside. She saw me noticing and squeezed my hand, a silent plea not to look too closely. Apologetically, she explained how different people need different things to sleep. Some need darkness, some noise, some need to see everything all the time. Because once, long ago, someone turned off the light thinking it was kinder. Nothing bad happened right away, which was the worst part. Fear needs time, repetition, nights stacked together until one mistake feels harmless. My rational mind tried to label it trauma, anxiety, childhood fear, but her voice carried certainty, not imagination, but memory. She said light isn't protection by itself, attention is. Darkness isn't dangerous because you can't see, but because it lets you forget. I thought of places where lights are turned off without asking, care homes, hospitals, spare bedrooms, places where routines replace conversation and the light becomes optional. My stomach tightened as her words aimed at something deeper than superstition. Slowly, carefully, she said that when the light is on, the room knows you're paying attention. Someone is still being seen, still being remembered. I laughed nervously and asked if she meant the dark gets offended. She didn't laugh back. She said, "The dark doesn't care." That was worse because it suggested something else did, something patient, something that only needed absence. She leaned against my shoulder, and for a moment, the room felt almost normal. Even then, one eye stayed open, fixed on the lamp. The light had become our third presence, a silent witness. I realized darkness wasn't the real threat, forgetting was. As minutes passed, another feeling crept in beneath the fear, the awareness that someday you get tired, distracted, and let habits decide. That's when rules matter most. She wasn't asking me to keep the light on forever, she was asking me to remember why. As the light hummed and her grip tightened when my eyes drifted closed, one truth settled in. Whatever she feared didn't need darkness to arrive, it needed permission.
Have you ever felt that moment when nothing changes, yet your body insists something has? The room stayed the same, but inside me a certainty formed that we were being noticed. Somewhere between my eyes adjusting to the brightness and the hum fading into background noise, the air grew heavier. Not colder or warmer, just fuller, like the space had absorbed an extra thought. I might have ignored it if she hadn't gone still beside me at the exact same moment. Her fingers tightened around mine as if we'd both heard something no one else could. I asked what was wrong, already knowing the answer wouldn't help. She whispered, "It's early." Early for what? The night, our marriage, or a countdown she'd been tracking long before me? She sat up, eyes sweeping the room, not panicked, but alert, like checking vital signs. I followed her gaze, expecting a shadow, a movement, anything I could dismiss. There was nothing, and that absence felt deliberate, like a stage waiting for its cue. She told me to keep talking about anything because silence made it easier. Easier for what, she didn't say. I rambled about how strange it felt to finally be married, how life felt the same and different. She nodded at the right moments, but her eyes kept drifting to the corners. Without warning, the light flickered once, so fast I could have blamed my eyes, except she gasped and said my name like a prayer. My heart kicked hard even as my mind reached for logic. I said it was fine, lights flicker all the time. She shook her head and said, "Not like that." Before I could ask, the hum returned, steady and bright. The room looked the same, but my skin prickled, every sense tuned too high. She apologized again too quickly, saying she shouldn't have let me think about it.
She said it usually waits longer. The word waits lodged in my chest. You don't wait for things that aren't coming. I asked what she meant by usually. She said as long as the light stays on and someone is awake, it can't do much. Can't do much, like an inconvenience, not a terror. I asked what it had done before. She said the first sign is always the same. The room feels fuller, like someone pulled up a chair without moving it. As she spoke, the sensation hit me, being observed from everywhere at once. Not the door, not the window, the room itself. I sat straighter, smoothed the sheets, adjusted myself without choosing to. My body reacted before my mind caught up. She saw it happen and her eyes widened, almost in relief. She said, "You feel it too." I wanted to deny it because admitting it felt like inviting it, but I said something felt off. She nodded, resigned, not afraid. She said this is why she hates rooms with mirrors. Reflections give it too many places to stand without being seen. I looked at the mirror across the bed and felt a chill, not from what I saw, from what I expected to see. Then came a sound from above us, so soft it barely existed, like the faintest exhale. I held my breath, waiting for it to repeat. Nothing followed. My mind searched for explanations, vents, pipes, air. The air was off, the windows were closed. She leaned close and whispered that it does that sometimes, tests whether you're listening. I asked what happens if you are. She said, then it knows you remember. That word again, remember. Suddenly, the light didn't feel enough. Whatever this was wasn't hiding. It was waiting to be acknowledged. Minutes passed, the room unchanged, yet the presence pressed closer. I realized this wasn't meant to scare you into running. It crept closer the longer you stayed. It didn't need proof to exist. It fed on awareness. The light flickered again, longer this time. My heart stuttered. She whispered, "Please," and didn't finish the sentence. I understood then what she feared wasn't noise or movement. It was attention, and whatever had noticed us now knew it had been seen. The next days unfold like a slow-burn nightmare, quiet, patient, watching. The chair's presence seeps into the rhythm of the house, into his pulse, into the guilt curling in his chest. Every time he crosses the living room, an invisible tug pulls him back toward the chair. He feels phantom fingers hook into his shirt, urging him toward the seat. The fear mixed with comfort becomes the most dangerous kind of attachment. One cold evening, exhausted and aching, he finally gives in and approaches the chair. The moment he sits, the wood vibrates with relief, rocking him gently. He closes his eyes as the chair cradles him, sinking into its rhythm. The house dissolves, no refrigerator hum, no street noise, just wind chimes from years ago. Lavender fills the air, warm hands rest on his shoulders like they used to. A soft, familiar humming floats around him, his wife's melody. Tears rise as he whispers, "Is it you?" The chair rocks slower, almost answering, but the humming distorts as if someone half remembers the tune. The lavender thickens, turning sour. The hands on his shoulders tighten, not comforting, but claiming. He gasps and opens his eyes. The room feels darker, heavier. The chair continues rocking even though he isn't. He stands back, whispering, "Stop." The chair rocks harder, angrier, vibrating under the dim light. His shout freezes the chair mid-motion, unnaturally still. "You're not her," he whispered. A cold, disappointed silence fills the room, the chair's disappointment. The house stops pretending, the memories turn sharp and violent. While washing dishes, he sees his wife in the chair rocking violently. He blinks, she vanishes, but the chair still rocks in the window's reflection. At night, he hears wood dragging slowly across the floor. Peeking from his doorway, he sees the chair tilted towards him, eager. One night, a voice drifts down the hallway, raspy, familiar. It sounds like his wife, but not quite. "Come, sit," the voice whispers. His heart pounds as he frantically covers his ears. The voice grows firmer. "Sit, please." Silence follows, thick, threatening, patient. By morning, drag marks scar the floor outside his bedroom.
Terror shatters him. He rushes for the front door. His hand twists the knob, inches away. The door refuses to turn, as if held from the other side. He slams into the door, screaming for escape. Behind him, the chair creaks, close, too close. He turns and sees the chair only feet away, mocking him with a slow rock. Pressed against the door, tears fill his eyes as the rocking speeds up, vibrating with excitement. "Please stop," he whispers. Miraculously, the chair slows, then stops, as if bargaining. He collapses to the floor, the house feeling like a cage owned by the chair's hunger. A twisted guilt gnaws at him, a guilt that doesn't feel like his. It feels planted, grown inside him. That evening, the room flickers like reality cracking. Shadows deepen, a metallic scent fills the air. In the chair sits his wife, slumped forward, barely breathing. He whispers her name, stepping closer as the image sharpens. She gasps and reaches for him, weak, trembling. Horror floods him as he realizes this isn't his memory. He was never home when she died. He never saw her last moments. The figure lifts its head, eyes hollow, endless. The vision snaps away, the chair rocks once, like acknowledging its revelation. He collapses, shaking, asking why the chair showed him something forbidden. A chilling realization spreads. Maybe the chair remembers her better than he ever could. Maybe it wants to give that memory to him. Maybe it wants him to finish the ending she couldn't escape. The chair rocks slowly, savoring his fear and understanding. He realizes the true danger. The chair doesn't just want you to sit, it wants you to stay, forever. It wants to keep him the way it kept her. And now he isn't sure he can resist. Have you ever tried to tell a story that refuses to stay in order, leaking out in fragments because saying it straight through would make it too real? The most terrifying memories aren't loud. They're the quiet routines that once felt harmless. After the second flicker, the room seemed to settle, as if satisfied. She let out a slow breath and said we had time. Not much, but enough. I asked time for what, already sensing this wasn't about the night ending. It was about something beginning. She said she needed to explain. Not everything, just enough so I wouldn't make it worse by trying to help. My chest tightened, because helping is instinct when someone is afraid. But her fear wasn't asking for comfort, it was asking for precision. She began with nights from her childhood, nights spent sharing a room with someone who needed the light on, someone who forgot where they were when darkness came. At first it was a nightlight, then a lamp, then the overhead light, because shadows grew teeth when memory slipped. Adults called it temporary, exhaustion, old age doing what it does. No one thought twice about flipping the switch once they believed everyone was asleep. She paused there, long enough for the clock to become audible again. I realized she was choosing what not to say. She told me the first time nothing dramatic happened. No screams, no sudden violence, just a change, a heaviness in the room when the light went out, like something had been allowed to finish a thought it was holding back. The person beside her didn't wake up screaming. They woke up quieter, more distant, as if part of them had stepped into the dark and forgotten the way back. Over the following nights, it happened again, always after the lights were turned off, always after someone decided it was time. Understanding crept in as she spoke. The fear wasn't immediate, it was cumulative, built from small kindnesses that ignored the rule. She said the thing she calls he never showed himself. He never needed to. His presence was measured in absences, memories that didn't return, names that slipped away, faces that became unfamiliar. She learned the light didn't stop him, it only slowed him down. Light meant someone was watching, someone might notice what was being taken. I thought about the room feeling fuller earlier, like a chair being pulled up. I wondered how many nights it had waited beside beds, patiently, waiting for attention to fade. She admitted she once thought it was her fault, that her fear invited it, that being braver or quieter might have stopped it. My heart broke at that. It sounded like how children explained what they can't control. The worst part wasn't the nights when lights went out,
It was the mornings after, when routines continued unchanged, when no one noticed someone was a little less there. As she spoke, the pressure returned, the feeling of being listened to. I wondered if remembering made it weaker or stronger. She said the person beside her faded over time, not all at once, until one night the light stayed on and it didn't matter anymore. There was nothing left for it to take. That's when she understood what he wanted. Not darkness, not fear, permission to erase. She pressed her forehead to mine, asked me not to ask who it was, not to ask how old she was. The details didn't matter, the pattern did. She said when you're young, love feels like grand promises, forever. When you're older, love becomes about remembering, about keeping the light on when it's inconvenient, even when you're tired. Dread washed over me, unrelated to monsters. It had everything to do with time. I saw the shape of what she feared stretching across decades, feeding not on terror, but on neglect. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were wet but steady. She said she didn't need me to be brave. Her voice cracked as she said she needed me to stay awake. I understood this wasn't just her past. It was a warning about our future, about how love can dim without anyone touching the switch. The light burned overhead as the room held its breath. I realized whatever he was wasn't tied to one house or one childhood. He followed the pattern, and now that I knew it, so did I.
Have you ever thought one small act could become the point where everything tilts? The line between safety and the unknown? That's what happened a few hours into our wedding night. The room had settled into a fragile rhythm of light, hum, and careful attention. In a moment of foolish curiosity, I reached for the switch to dim the light just a little. I imagined it would be romantic, softer, easier to sleep. Before my fingers touched the plastic, her hand clamped over mine, sharp, insistent, almost painful. She whispered, eyes wide and rigid, "No, don't, please." I laughed nervously, assuming exhaustion had caught up with her. The intensity of her stare killed the laughter in my throat. This wasn't theatrics or a harmless quirk. It was a rule learned the hard way. Silence stretched, thickening the air as if the room waited for my decision. Love and curiosity warred inside my chest. Something deeper warned me that touching the switch would cross a line. In a terrible, almost invisible instant, I did it anyway, slowly, carefully, as if hesitation could protect me. The room reacted before I understood what I'd done. The hum of the light dropped lower, subtly distorted. Shadows stiffened where they stood. The air thickened. Her grip tightened until it hurt. She whispered against my skin, "You promised." The weight of that word crushed me. It wasn't disappointment. It was alarm. It was sorrow. It was warning. I knew then her fear wasn't imagined. It was patient. It was aware. And it had begun to move. Nothing visibly changed. No doors, no shadows. Yet pressure built in my chest, heavy and undeniable. The room felt larger and more crowded at the same time, like unseen chairs multiplying in the corners. I turned to her, stumbling over words. "What is happening? What does he want?" She shook her head, tears pooling, and whispered, "You'll see." The word "see" terrified me more than anything else. There was nothing to see, only presence, only intent. Seconds stretched into minutes. The hum of the light pulsed like a heartbeat. I felt every thought being observed, every hesitation measured. She leaned into me, whispering my name, reminding herself we were together. Even that felt fragile. Awareness seemed to make it more aware of us. Then came a sound, soft,
deliberate, almost polite, like the exhale of a forgotten clock. It came from above or behind the curtains. I couldn't tell. My body locked in place. She buried her face into my shoulder. "Stay awake," she whispered. "Don't close your eyes." The room no longer felt full. It felt alive, a patient organism waiting. I realized the light wasn't keeping darkness away. It was keeping him patient. By dimming it, I had opened a door. The idea made my stomach twist with adrenaline. I could feel it moving without moving, like a shadow pressing a wall, like cold sliding along my spine. She whispered, almost to herself, "I've never seen anyone survive when they ignore it." The word survive hit harder than any scream. This wasn't about monsters. It was about rules meant to hold the invisible back, rules written in fear and loss. I had broken one, just slightly. The room, the silence, the crushing weight told me the truth. He had noticed.
Have you ever realized the worst fear isn't seeing something terrible, but knowing it's already close enough to see you? Once the light dimmed and steadied again, the room never truly returned to what it was. It held its shape like a carefully maintained lie. The pressure in the air thickened until every breath felt borrowed. She went completely still against me, not trembling, not crying, just listening. Her stillness carried the focus of someone who knows movement can be an invitation. I followed her lead, afraid even shifting my weight would announce us. In the stretched silence, my body became unbearably loud. Blood rushed in my ears, my chest rose and fell too shallowly. Even my thoughts felt noisy. Then I felt it. Not a touch, but proximity, like someone standing too close behind you in a line, close enough to feel without contact. Except this wasn't warmth. It was hollow cold, an absence of temperature that made my skin prickle. My instinct was to turn and look. She dug her nails into my arm. Barely moving her lips, she whispered, "Don't look for him." That terrified me more than anything else. It meant he wasn't in one place. Looking would only tell him we were ready to see. The room answered that thought with a faint creak, not from the floor or the door, from somewhere above, as if the ceiling had shifted its weight. My heart slammed so hard I was sure he could hear it. She pressed her forehead to my chest. She began counting softly, numbers out of order, like naming anchors, moments, memories, keeping herself present. I understood then that whatever was here did not move like a person. It didn't approach step by step. It became more present the longer we acknowledged it. The light flickered again, not off, not even dim, just a subtle pulse, like an eye blinking. The sensation of being watched intensified. I felt exposed in a way clothes can't protect against, like something was looking past my face, into the parts meant to stay private. My thoughts began to slip. Words lost their edges. Moments from earlier blurred. Panic flared as forgetting suddenly felt dangerous. She whispered urgently, "Say my name." I said it, my voice cracking, again and again, louder than I meant to. Each time the pressure eased slightly, like pushing back a tide. She said my name in return, matching my rhythm, anchoring us through sound, through memory. I understood then that it didn't hunt bodies. It hunted attention. It fed where awareness thinned, where care faded into habit. It hovered now, testing, waiting for one of us to falter. The realization hit like ice water. This wasn't a fight of force. There was nothing to strike, nothing to scream at. It lived in the gaps. Slowly, deliberately, the pressure shifted, sliding away from me, moving toward her. She gasped softly, not in pain, in recognition. She whispered,
It remembers me. The fear in that was quiet and devastating. Being remembered wasn't comfort, it was selection. Helplessness settled over me. I couldn't shield her from something without distance or touch. She gripped my hand tighter, whispering fragments of memory, names, places, dates, as if listing them could save them. I joined in. How we met, what she wore, what made her laugh. With each memory, the room resisted slightly. The air trembled, stretched thin. For a moment, I thought it might work. Love and attention together. Then she went quiet. Not abruptly, just a pause. In that pause, the presence swelled, leaning in, eager. Terror flooded me. Silence felt like an opening. I shook her gently, saying her name. She blinked, startled, like she'd drifted far away. She whispered, exhausted, "It's patient." That was the true horror. It didn't need tonight. It could wait years, decades, until vigilance slipped, until love softened into routine, until turning off the light felt kind. As the presence receded to the edges, I understood. This was only a pause, not an ending. He wasn't done with us. He was learning how long we could stay awake.
Have you ever sensed that the truth you're about to hear will change the meaning of every fear that came before? Like, once it's spoken, there's no going back to believing this is just a bad night. The pressure eased enough for us to breathe again. She didn't relax. She didn't collapse into relief. She stared at the light like someone watching a fragile heart monitor. I knew then this wasn't the worst of it. What we'd felt was only confirmation. After a long silence, she spoke. She said she'd never planned to tell me everything, not because she didn't trust me, but because saying it out loud makes it real. She said the thing she calls he was never a stranger, never an intruder from somewhere else. It was something that grew alongside people, something that learned patterns and routines, something that noticed weakening attention. It first appeared not as fear, but as comfort. The quiet presence you feel when someone else takes over, when responsibility shifts and you stop watching. My stomach tightened as she explained who he comes to. Those beings slowly set aside, not abandoned in anger, eased into invisibility, like dimming a light instead of turning it off. She noticed him most when caretakers changed, when nights ran on schedules instead of names, when lights were turned off for better sleep, and no one noticed the pause afterward, the delay before someone answered when called, the way memories unraveled only at night. I realized this wasn't one childhood moment, it was a pattern she'd watched repeat. She said he feeds on being forgotten, on care becoming automatic, on attention thinning. Light matters not because it scares him, but because it means choosing to see someone, choosing to stay present when it's inconvenient. I thought about how the presence shifted toward her earlier, how it recognized her. She confirmed it quietly. Once you're noticed, you're never fully forgotten by him. He remembers those who remember him. The room felt colder as she kept speaking. Marriage didn't invite him. Love did. Love creates the deepest routines, the safest assumptions, the moments you think someone else is watching so you don't have to. She looked at me then, not with fear, with grief. She said he doesn't take people all at once. He thins them, night by night, until what's left is easier to manage, easier to care for without really seeing. That's when people stop noticing him, because by then, the person has gone quiet, compliant, and everyone calls it aging or illness or time doing what it does. My chest ached with understanding. Every flipped switch felt dangerous now. Every darkened room felt like a doorway. She said she'd spent her life watching for him, learning the signs, staying awake when others slept, keeping lights on in defiance. As long as someone stayed aware, he couldn't finish. Her voice shook as she admitted the truth. Tonight wasn't just about the dimmed light.
She'd felt him consider me, had sensed his curiosity. He doesn't only take the vulnerable, he takes those who will become vulnerable. That realization hit harder than anything else. This wasn't only about protecting her, it was about our future, about inevitable weakness. The light glowed overhead, harsh and merciless. I understood the true horror wasn't his presence, it was his patience, the way he waits for love to become routine, for vigilance to soften into trust. She finished speaking in a whisper. He doesn't come when you're afraid. Her eyes met mine, steady, devastated. He comes when you're comfortable. The room felt more dangerous than ever before, because comfort is inevitable, and I realized this wasn't about one night. It was about remembering each other long enough to keep the light on.
Have you ever been faced with a choice that doesn't feel like a choice at all? Because either way, something is lost. The weight of deciding pressed so hard on my chest I could barely breathe. The night dragged on. The light burned overhead, harsh and unblinking. Finally, she said we couldn't stay like this forever. Vigilance without rest becomes its own kind of forgetting. The way she said it told me she'd carried that truth for years. She explained the presence hadn't gone anywhere. It was waiting for one of us to falter. She looked at me with love and resignation mixed together. Eventually, one of us would have to sleep. One of us would have to trust the other to stay awake. The horror of that realization settled slowly. This wasn't about one night. It was about how we would live together, how we would age, how we would weaken. She asked quietly if I understood what that meant. I nodded. She said the light could stay on, bright, unforgiving, but someone still had to notice. Light without attention is just glare. Then she said the final rule out loud. He can't take from two people who are actively remembering each other. Attention shared is attention protected. The choice sharpened into focus. One of us would always be watching, always anchoring the other. Love wasn't romance anymore. It wasn't comfort. It was labor. Exhausting, constant, invisible labor. She said this was why she'd never stayed anywhere long, why she'd never let anyone get too close. Most people promise vigilance until they're tired. Then they call it practicality. She said she wasn't asking me to sacrifice my life, only to understand the life we were choosing. The room leaned in again, listening. The hum of the light grew louder. That familiar pressure returned. Not strong, but insistent, curious. I knew he was paying attention, watching our decision. She said there was one more thing, one last truth. Her voice shook. If both of us ever slept at the same time, if attention slipped completely, he wouldn't take both of us. He would choose. The one left awake would never fully remember the one taken. That's how he survives, by making loss feel natural. The terror nearly broke me. Even grief could be erased. She asked if I still wanted to stay, if I still wanted this marriage, knowing the greatest danger wasn't violence or sickness or betrayal, but comfort, routine, exhaustion. She waited for my answer. The room felt unbearably full. Pressure wrapped around us like invisible hands. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Not the dimming of a light, but the weighing of love against survival. I said yes, not because I was brave, not because I was certain, but because living without remembering her felt worse than fear. The pressure eased slightly, enough to breathe. She closed her eyes for the first time that night, trusting me to stay awake, trusting me to watch. I sat under the relentless glow, listening to the hum of the light, listening to her breathing. I understood the choice wasn't heroic, it was permanent. The true horror wasn't the light going out. It was knowing that someday, inevitably,
I would get tired. Have you ever noticed how morning light feels gentler than artificial light? How it tricks you into believing the night has no authority anymore? Dawn crept through the thin gap in the curtains. Pale gold spilled across the room. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing felt haunted. For a brief, dangerous moment, I wondered if we'd imagined everything. Fear and exhaustion turning a wedding night into something it never was. She stirred beside me, blinked slowly. Her face was soft with sleep. She smiled. Relief hit me so hard my chest ached. She thanked me for staying awake, for keeping the light on, for watching. Her voice sounded normal, almost convincing, almost proof that the rule had worked. Love and attention were enough. We dressed, packed our things, laughed awkwardly about the strange night, careful not to name it. We stepped into the bright hallway. The weight lifted, like leaving the room broke the spell. For hours, the world behaved as it should. Sunlight, noise, movement, all the things that make darkness feel small, manageable. But something nagged beneath the relief, a faint unease, like forgetting the end of a sentence. It waited. Later, at a cafe, she went quiet mid-conversation, stared at the window, a puzzled frown across her face. Fear sharpened instantly. She asked me who had stayed awake with her the night before. I laughed, thought she was joking. Then I saw her eyes. Confusion deepened. She apologized, said she must still be tired, said something felt moved in her memory, just slightly. My heart began to pound. I remembered the warning. He doesn't need darkness. He only needs time. I noticed she no longer watched the lights, no longer counted seconds, no longer scanned corners. I asked her about it. She frowned again, genuinely unsure why she ever would have. Panic crept in slowly. Vigilance fading wasn't victory. It was the cost. Over the next days, little things slipped. Shared memories landing wrong. Jokes she didn't remember laughing at. Moments becoming one-sided. Each time I reminded her, she thanked me politely, like someone humoring a stranger. One quiet evening, she turned off the living room light. No hesitation. The room felt normal, safe, empty. She smiled, said it was better this way, easier on the eyes. I stood frozen, understanding too late. Staying awake saved her body, not her memory. He had taken something else, something subtle, something that looked like peace. I turned the light back on. She flinched in irritation, not fear, and I understood the true horror. He wouldn't come someday. He already had. Loving someone means noticing when they fade, even when they don't remember being afraid of the dark anymore.
Have you ever wondered what happens after the story ends? After fear stops screaming? After it settles quietly, becoming part of the furniture of your life? This isn't horror that fades. It grows more convincing with time. Weeks passed after that morning, weeks that looked normal from the outside. Newlyweds learning routines, choosing groceries, arguing softly about trivial things. Nothing visibly wrong, except I noticed I was always reminding her, filling gaps she didn't know existed. At first, it felt harmless, even loving, carrying weight for someone you care about. Then the pattern emerged, subtle, terrifying. Every time I remembered for her, she remembered less herself. Every time I stayed alert, she grew more comfortable letting go. I became the watcher alone. Attention was no longer shared, it was delegated. Delegation is what he waits for. The worst part was how reasonable it felt, how easy it was to justify. Isn't that what love is? Stepping in when the other is tired? Nights became quieter, not tense, manageable. She slept deeply now, peacefully, without fear, without the light. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, counting seconds, listening to hums, keeping lights on longer than needed, telling myself awareness was enough. Awareness erodes when it's one-sided. It becomes exhaustion. Exhaustion becomes habit. Habit becomes neglect. One night, I thought she didn't need the light, that maybe the rule wasn't for me. The room felt fuller, not sudden, just settled, like someone sitting comfortably. Terror flooded me. He took her fear on purpose. Fear is work. Fear is attention. Without it, watching is optional. I saw the future clearly. Years of me watching, years of her resting, until I became tired, until I needed rest. She would say she'd watch, and I would let her, because love teaches trust. Trust is dangerous. I saw how it ends, not with screams, with role exchange. Watcher and watched, until one night attention doesn't pass back. The light goes out, not flipped, forgotten. I saw it everywhere, in how people talk about aging, about forgetting, calling it natural, calling it inevitable. They're not really there anymore. I wondered how often he was invited, by kindness, by exhaustion, by efficient care. There is no villain, no single moment to stop, only daily choices, to notice or not. I sit here now. The house is quiet, the lights are on. She sleeps peacefully nearby. Part of me envies her rest. I am so tired. I understand the oldest fear, not death, not darkness, becoming invisible while alive. I don't know how long I can watch. Attention without sharing fades. Love isn't forever. It's staying awake. If you're listening late at night, in a quiet room, thinking of turning a light off, ask yourself why it's on, who it's for, and if someone else is watching. The danger isn't fear of the dark. It's when the dark feels harmless, when comfort tells you to rest, and somewhere, patiently, he is counting on that.
Have you ever realized that the scariest endings don't feel like endings at all? They feel like continuation, like tomorrow arriving on schedule. This story doesn't end with a scream. It ends with life moving forward as if nothing is wrong. Now, whenever night falls, I notice things I never noticed before. How often people turn off lights for reasons that sound kind. How often tiredness is treated like permission. How often attention is handed to routine and called love. I see him everywhere, not as a shape, not as a presence, as a pattern. In dim hallways, in quiet rooms, in the pause before someone answers their own name. What happened on our wedding night wasn't an attack, it was an introduction. A lesson in how gently a person can be erased, without panic. There's no single moment to point to, no clear line where it begins. Forgetting happens softly, cooperatively, with everyone's approval. Sometimes she watches me with polite concern. She asks if I'm okay, tells me I look tired, suggests I rest. Her kindness breaks my heart. She doesn't remember why that kindness terrifies me. I wonder how many times she said this before. How many watchers became the watched. How many lights were turned off for sleep. I understand the final truth now. He doesn't destroy love. He uses it. He rides forward on good intentions. When I imagine the future, I don't see darkness rushing in. I see a calm room, a reasonable decision, a light switched off because everything feels fine. I don't know which role I'll play, the one in the dark or the one at the switch. Either way, the ending is the same if attention fades. That's why I'm telling you this, not to scare you of the dark, to make you pause before you call forgetting natural. before you call comfort harmless, before you assume someone else is watching. Nothing has to look wrong for everything to be lost. If tonight you leave a light on without knowing why, if turning it off feels wrong, trust that feeling. Fear doesn't always mean danger is coming. Sometimes it means something is already waiting, patient, unseen, counting on the moment you decide